welcome to Behind the Shadows. My name is Susan Finelli, and I am your host and author of Behind the Shadows, a program where we go behind the shadows of what meets the eye. This evening, we will be going behind the shadows of sex addiction. Our special guest tonight is Puja Hall. Puja is a licensed certified social worker, a registered certified psychoanalyst, and psychotherapist. Puja counsels individuals and couples struggling with sexual addiction, sexual compulsivity, codependency, love addiction, and intimacy issues. Puja is a featured speaker in Project Respect, an educational program of the Sex Crimes Unit at the Kings County District Attorney's Office. She is the founder and director of the New York Center for Treatment of Sex and Porn Addiction, located on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Puja, welcome to Behind the Shadows.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure to have you here this evening. You know, this topic is, I think, such a relevant topic. We see so much going on in the newspapers. I mean, we pick up a newspaper and it ruins careers. Tiger Woods, MSK, Wiener, Spitzer.
Yes.
Is this a power thing? Is it an internal struggle? I mean, just what is this?
It really depends. You can't talk about everybody is the same. You know, there are different diagnoses for different people. It has to be looked at individually. However, there certainly is an increase, and I think that's due to the internet. There has been an increase of people escaping into, for example, porn addiction, sexually explicit chat rooms, into searching online for prostitution. There has been an explosion. Even children, the sexting and so on.
Yes.
Young adults. So there has been an explosion, and we see it, us professionals, we do see it in our office as more and more people are coming in. And in fact, I would say while tragic, people like Wiener and Tiger Woods and so on, it does help. It does help sort of bring it out to the awareness of the public, and also for people to find out that there is help available. People who struggle with it, and they're not alone.
Right. Well, you know, the individuals that I mentioned are all male. Is the ratio more male to female, or is when it's female we just don't hear about it? I mean, I can't recollect in recent memory hearing about a powerful woman who was tied up. Yeah.
Right. Well, you know, there actually are studies being conducted about that, and we, as professionals, we have talked about that quite a bit. Our understanding is really, first of all, women struggle with this as well.
Yes.
But I think sometimes when women enter treatment, it's usually couched in a different way, as love addiction, struggles in intimacy, struggles with unavailable men, codependency, etc. So often it is labeled different. People come into treatment under a different heading.
Right.
There is also the issue of women being in the sex trade, and my experience has been that they don't come into treatment that often, and not that much, and of course they don't stay very long. And I think it has to do with because this is their livelihood, and very often they are afraid. Then what else are they going to do?
Well, the sex trade, is that an addiction to sex? Is it an addiction to drugs that they need to make the money? Is it addiction to being controlled by a powerful person? I mean, what addiction is that for the sex trade?
Well, one thing again, it has to be viewed individually. You know, you do find quite a substantial number of women being survivors of sexual abuse, of trauma, etc., or they come from homes where there has been maybe drug abuse, etc., etc. So there might be a whole host of background. However, one thing, Susan, I do want to point out: sex addiction is not about sex.
Okay, so we're going to go into that. Exactly. We're definitely
going to talk about sex. That is the venue.
I see.
And in fact, sex addiction is also referred to as as process addiction often, which is really the addiction to a process. The addictive behavior is really more like gambling, eating, working out, exercise, etc. So it's really, the addiction is to a process, to addictive behavior rather than an end result. And it's not, it just happens to take this form.
So let's define addiction. What is an addiction?
Right. Really, if somebody's addicted, there is an out of control behavior. There's often an escalation. There is often a sense of there is a buildup of tolerance. There can be withdrawal symptoms, but at the heart of it is that there is an out of controlness. There is an unmanageability. People struggle with very often. I mean, they want to stop, but they find themselves they can't. So that kind of powerlessness is really what defines an addiction, and often devastating consequences. The people you mentioned, obviously these are very, while very powerful men, also very smart people, and this kind of self-destructive behavior really makes no sense.
Yeah,
right?
I often wonder, how can someone so smart be so stupid when you see something like this happening?
Right, and that's what the addiction, the compulsion, being driven to do something, being compelled.
Is it a physical thing that drives people to an addiction, and a chemical imbalance?
Well, there's a lot of different underlying issues, and you have to, again, as I mentioned, there can be trauma history, there might be sexual abuse, there might be abandonment, neglect. There can be a whole host of underlying issues that have to be explored, whatever that is. But at the heart of it is that it is people go into addiction as an escape, as a mood changer, as a way of comfort, soothing. That's right. Can be soothing, and very often they might not be aware of even that what drives them, and very often in sex addiction, Susan, they don't necessarily know why they are driven to act out sexually. They're just compelled to do so.
Do they realize that they're addicted to sex, or do they think, a 17, 18-year-old boy that his hormones are going crazy, is he addicted to sex, or is it just a chemical change in his body? And the 30-year-old man who is truly addicted to sex, do they realize that they're addicted to sex?
Well, actually, at some point they do, a lot of them. Sometimes it takes a complete crash in terms of loss of work and family, etc., which then brings them to realize there is a bigger issue.
Right.
The denial factor, of course, is a huge issue here, like in any addiction.
And they seek a sexual high, I'm assuming.
It's a sexual high. It's they're looking for the thrill, and again, that's why it's addictive process. It's the seeking of the high, the thrill. It's more that rather than necessarily the end result of whatever it is.
Right. Do you think that secretly that they're ashamed?
Oh, there's a tremendous amount of shame. Tremendous amount of shame. Usually, again, a person who comes into my office because they themselves struggle with it, and they are compelled to come in because they see there's a tremendous amount of shame. Because one thing I would say, from all the addictions, Susan, I would say the sex addiction is the most stigmatized.
Is it really?
Oh, it's
a social thing?
I think that is, we're used to having people, somebody say, I go to AA, I go to NA. It has been around for 75, 85 years. Everybody's used to know somebody in their family, extended family. So people know about that, and it's more accepted. It's, you can say I'm going, I've struggled with alcoholism, I'm in AA.
Right.
That's no big deal. But to say I'm a sex addict and I'm going to an S meeting, which is the these 12-step meetings for sex addiction, people struggling with sex addiction, it's a harder one.
Well, it's interesting because I never even knew there was an SA. Yeah, and I just never knew until when I was exploring the program with you, and then I was talking to people, and someone said to me, "Oh yes, she said I'm a sex addict, and I go to SA." And I said, first of all, I never would have thought. Somebody had a gun to my head and said, I never would have thought it, but I never knew there were meetings.
Yes,
and I'm assuming these people are living double lives.
Very much double lives. It's very much double life is actually the secrecy, the double life, and then the shame that comes with it. And of course that perpetuates the whole thing because you feel terrible about yourself. Then you get depressed. Some people get very hopeless, and then of course who wants to feel hopeless all the time? So that feeds the addiction, unfortunately. But I have had somebody come in actually because this person was referred by suicide hotline, believe it or not, because he felt so hopeless.
Yeah.
It really is. It's devastating.
Yeah, it is. It is devastating. But now, if someone's partner is addicted to sex, what are the signs for this partner to recognize that, he or she is addicted to sex? Do they stop having sex with you because they're out there? I mean, what should people be looking for if they think, I think my spouse is has a sexual addiction?
Has a sexual addiction. One thing is there can be sexual addiction within a relationship, within the marriage, within a partnership, that there is that being played out in the relationship. However, much more so, you really see that then in their relationship, their sex kind of dies down, the intimacy dies down, because particularly, with porn addiction, for example, people start spending hours and hours and hours in front of the internet watching porn, So if your significant other keeps on doing that for hours and hours and hours, and there's less and less interest in you, even not just sexually but emotionally, there is a distancing, there is a withdrawal, there is an unavailability. You just feel there is not reachable. You feel there is some secrecy going on. These are all warning signs, but it doesn't have to just be on the internet. People go to massage parlors, go to prostitutes, but as a partner, you would feel that your partner is less available. They are more withdrawn. There usually is no sex, and because particularly with porn addiction, there are all these images in somebody's head, and of course that is very different than a real relational kind of interaction and sex with intimacy and relations.
And then you don't know when you're having sex with your partner, are they thinking of me, or are they rerunning an internet session in their brain?
Which actually happens a lot.
It does.
And it does happen a lot. And that's why when people have sex and with their partner, they will also feel again that disconnect, that the other is not present. It's like, we're not connecting because these images are running.
I see. Well, let's talk a little bit about some examples of sexually addictive behaviors. And one of them is compulsive masturbation.
Yes.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Of course, that's in a way the loneliest of all of them.
Right.
Because that is, you will see people really struggle. Somebody struggles really with, often with social skills, maybe even how to relate to another. There might be also a lot of trauma. There might be also a tremendous amount of anxiety, the need for self-soothing. I had a young man also where it really had to do with his background of sexual abuse. So, but that masturbation is a very powerful one, and that might happen in an intimate relationship, and then you will feel again that the partner is not related to you, or some people struggle with really having any relationship. They just go in the internet, the images are one click away.
Right.
And so they're not confronted with having to address the relational piece, and but it's a lot of loneliness, lot of loneliness. Yeah.
Now, and this I'm talking about something now that's really is a whole new topic, and I just want to kind of touch on it. But these people out there with children porn, which is, it's just, I can't even think about it. But is that what addiction is that? Is that a sexual addiction?
You're talking about people who cross the line and watching pornography.
Children.
Well, there has been an increase of that as well.
Yeah.
You know, and one needs to really distinguish between. But there is a lot of questions about it. There are actually quite a bit of studies around that. Dr. Michael Soto in Canada has done a lot of studies around that to really determine, first of all, if the people who watch, who are these people, and will they cross over? Is that just a beginning stage to actually crossing over to touching?
Right.
Or is that really, how much is it so that would be really, we're looking at sexual offender, I mean, and really an escalation of that?
Yes.
Or are we looking at sexual addiction?
Right.
I think some people, it is an escalation with the sexual addiction, because again, sexual addiction is you want more. You need more and more. So if I have done this, what else can I do? This is what I did before, going to massage parlor, went to a strip joint, watch normal porn, so to speak.
Right.
I go to chat rooms. It's not doing it anymore. So let me now, what else can I do?
Experiment with.
So there is that category, but it needs to be distinguished. I do get a lot of calls also of people who got in trouble with the law, and sometimes they might be trying to use sex addiction, even though it's really not sex addiction, as a way, an excuse to really of a bigger problem. So you need to distinguish, but it does exist. I have a few people in my practice where really. Where it's a sex addiction, it's gotten more out of control, and the thing is these days you don't even necessarily have to look for this stuff anymore. It just pops right up.
Exactly, yeah. It pops right up. I remember one time I was researching, and a disclaimer because it's not an advertisement, I was researching Banana Republic, and I spelled the word banana wrong, and it was horrifying what came
amazing,
up.
Right?
It was amazing what came up.
So if somebody struggles, if somebody needs soothing, a mood changer, escape, has a hard time, it's click
easy.
away. Yeah.
It's a click away. Is a rapist, that's not a sexual addiction.
No,
that's just a violent act. That's just a violent.
No, we want to make that clear. This is offender. This is that's a totally different story.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And someone who's a serial cheater on a significant other. That is.
Again, you have to take. You have to get a lot of information. You can't say categorically, but yes, that can be. Sometimes it could just be bad behavior.
Yes. Yeah.
But that is part of sexual addiction, that somebody has to have constant, multiple, ongoing affairs all over the place. And then that is a way of, that's also sexual addiction. Because, some people consider sexual addiction, and I think it's a very accurate description also of an intimacy disorder.
I see. Interesting. Okay.
And I would say that then sums it up very well.
What's the difference between, the difference between sexual addiction and love addiction?
Right. Well, first of all, some people feel more comfortable with the word love addiction than sex addiction, so there is that category, and sometimes it's really, interchangeable. I have seen that quite a bit, and again, I also mentioned that women sometimes feel more comfortable of the label of love addicted rather than sex addicted. But in general, I would say, is love addiction. You might be really very much always going for the unavailable partner, and then heartbroken again, once again, and then again, and the next one, similar story. The unavailability, and also with love addiction, it would also be intriguing, the fantasizing, a lot of, which isn't sex addiction as well, but the intriguing, the kind of seduction.
Right.
But again, that plays also in sex addiction. So sometimes there really are, while there's some distinction, I would say, there is really also a lot of overlapping.
Is it, in love addiction, is it the fear of someone either being rejected or being alone all the time, and I'd rather be with this person that really is not nice to me, but he or she sticks around because I don't want to be alone?
But that can be sex addiction as well.
Also. So there's a very thin line, it seems.
In my book it is. In my book it certainly is. I mean, there is the love addiction of being unavailable with the unavailable person, the fear of being alone, and keep on seeking somebody that really it's not working out after a short period of time. So there is that terrible concern about how can I meet somebody this time? Hopefully this time this person will stay, and of course it's just meant to fail once again.
Once and for all. And do they ever learn?
Well, treatment,
Okay.
And also, beginning. I think these 12-step programs. There are various programs available for love addiction, sex addiction. There's SA, SRA, Sexual Recovery Anonymous, SC, Sexual Compulsive Anonymous. There's Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, SLAA. So there are various 12-step programs that often can be a good start for people to sort of looking at commonalities, what others have, and see there is really an issue for me to address. Now, while these 12-step programs are very helpful, they're extremely helpful, and I think in conjunction with treatment is really the best outcome.
Now, earlier in the program, you had mentioned couples sex addiction.
Yeah.
Is it usually like one person brings someone into it, or do they find each other?
That can be the case, but also that in a relationship, it could be used. The whole sexual addiction, the kind of seeking of the high, can be played out with the partner, and then that is where the partner then might feel we're having all this sex, but my significant other is not there, and almost feels used all the time because you feel there is not really connected, and it's never enough.
Right.
There will never be enough.
Well, I imagine that in the beginning of a couple's sexual addiction, that the other person must think, gee, he really loves me. He or she thinks I'm hot. I'm terrific in bed.
Right.
And then they wake up one morning and say, wait a minute, something. Right. I mean, in the beginning, it must be a high for the other person
as well. Can be.
Yes.
Right.
Until they realize
that there is. That's right. And and of course, again, at some point they realize, particularly in that it's about sex, but it's never enough, and there is something missing in the relationship, because the connecting, the intimacy is definitely not there. It will be missing because it's not about that, right? But it's true. At the beginning, it might be very exciting. Somebody is, all over you, very interested, but again, something will be missing.
Now, a porn addiction, we touched on it a little bit, but someone who is addicted to porn, are they usually in a relationship, or do they self-pleasure when they're watching the porn? I mean,
could be either.
Okay.
Either. Sometimes it's somebody who is really struggles with connecting. So it's very lonely. Their relationship is with the computer in the image, and they come home at night from work, and for the next 5 hours they will spend in front of the their computer and watch. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is that you might be married to somebody, and then you find your husband is or your wife, significant other, whoever it is constantly in front of this internet and is really not relating to you anymore for hours and hours. And again, they don't seek out any sexual and not much emotional interactions with you. They're preoccupied. They're totally drawn into this, and you're wondering what's going on here.
How does a parent deal with? I mean, young boys. I mean, in the old days, they'd sneak their father's Playboy magazines, but today now the parents have to be very careful with what they can see on the internet. internet, and, you know, I'm sure parents of young teenage boys, you know their sons are masturbating. I'm sure their fathers talk to them about that. But how does a parent, like, control this? Like, so it doesn't cross the line?
Right. Well, first of all, you know, there are filters also available, you know, but what we're really looking at is if your kid is at risk, if your kid is struggling, if there is something, so then they will be able to be drawn into that. And again, you know, you will see that they're spent many hours, and there might be the sexting going on, you know, so you will see signs like that. But it's really it affects children that are at risk, and so you know, they're trying to find a way. It's the same, you know, in that way, if it's drugs or alcohol, in this way, it's sex. You know, if you have the feeling as a parent that there is something going on with your child, the best is to trust your intuition.
I see. Now, this sexting, is this peer pressure among the teenagers? Is it sexual, you know, addiction? Is it some sort of an abuse? I mean, you know, you see these young kids sending these explicit pictures of themselves over the little phones or mobile devices.
Right. Some of it is, you know, it can be, you know, kids these days, but another part is also that you have to know your child, and you have to see what the issues are.
Well, Puja, I cannot believe that we are running out of time, but, you know, I do want to read one quote that you say: with time and commitment, recovery and relief is possible.
Yes.
It is. So I'd like to thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing your expertise and knowledge. And a special thank you for you, our audience, for tuning in tonight. And if you know someone who needs to recover and needs relief, you can certainly contact Puja directly. And again, if you've missed any of our programs, you can see them on my website at www.behindtheshadows.com and click on Public Access Television. If you have a topic that you would like me to address, you can contact me at susan@behindtheshadows.com. And until next time, remember, the brightest light shines behind the shadows. Thank you so much. I cannot believe you said
we went so fast, right?
I have so much more to talk about.
We
may have to do a part two.
Yeah, really. No, it's really quick, yeah.